How would you feel if one of the most prominent vegan leaders in the world was going around saying that he had magically cured an incurable disease through his vegan diet? Well, actually, this isn't entirely new. Sadly, especially within the world of raw food gurus and diet gurus generally, ridiculous claims have been made about that at almost every stage of the sad little history of our movement. One day, I hope, veganism is going to be on the bookshelf next to the great social movements in history, but not today. And, people like Durianrider and Freelee, they're as much victims of the unrealistic expectations that other people place on them as they are victims of the unrealistic expectations they place on themselves. My view of the two of them actually is moderate. You may think I'm angrily denouncing them or that I'm disappointed with them, but I'm not. And one of the reasons for that is that I'm not an ex-follower. I never had a period of my life before where I believed in these people or looked up to them or practiced their diet and then was later disappointed. People who have been through that experience tend to feel much more strongly about it and have resentment and hurt feelings and so on. However, there are two issues going to be broached in this video relatively quickly. The first is, we might as well get it out of the way, Durianrider is a guy who has both claimed to be diagnosed with Crohn's disease and to be diagnosed as having been cured of Crohn's disease, that he cured it, or he's stated that he could be. So this is just as absurd. I mean, anyone, if you haven't looked at the Wikipedia article on Crohn's disease, it's not hard to educate yourself a little bit about the nature of this disease. I knew one person in my life who had Crohn's disease. I was talking to another vegan YouTuber about this. He knew just one person, I think, when he was in school. If you've known someone with it, it is a terrifying, very serious disease. And morally speaking, to falsely claim that you have the disease or to falsely claim that you've cured the disease is just as low as to falsely claim that you have AIDS or to falsely claim that you've cured AIDS. Nobody has cured Crohn's disease. If somebody really was the first person in the world to cure the disease by eating a lot of bananas, that would be a major landmark in the history of science, and there'd be new research done on it for the same reasons that if someone cured AIDS by eating bananas, it would be a huge landmark in the history of science. That is really impossible. And the other truth is that sometimes Durianrider has said that yes, he absolutely was diagnosed medically with Crohn's disease, and sometimes he has said the exact opposite. So I'm going to play you a very short quotation here of what Durianrider said in an interview with a guy called Rich Roll. If you don't know him, he runs a podcast that sometimes talks about veganism and other stuff. So here is Durianrider's own voice and his own words talking to Rich Roll about this.
I mean, what were the doctors telling you when you would go in for, stuff revolving around having Crohn's?
They just said to my mum that I was making stuff up and things like that. The asthma, they could tell I had the asthma and stuff, so they gave me heaps of steroidal medication, things like that. But the digestive system was often I wouldn't go in anyway because I was too embarrassed to talk about it. But occasionally when I did go in, they did x-rays and stuff and got me to consume this radioactive stuff, and they just said, we can't find anything, Miss Johnson. I think your son's got a bit of imagination going on.
Oh, so they didn't even believe that you had it?
Correct.
Wow. So how did you finally figure out that that's what you had? I mean, you couldn't have self-diagnosed yourself with Crohn's at that age, did you? Or how did you finally figure out that that's what was going on?
That was only when I basically got over it that I worked out, well, that's what's happening, because I looked at the symptoms.
So there are some elements of that story that are all too human and all too believable. And I think anyone who hears that and compares what Durianrider says now to what Durianrider said before, if they had to choose, is he lying now or is he lying before in this podcast, I think most people would surmise that Durianrider was telling the truth, or most of the truth, in this interview with Rich Roll, and that he's been lying in more recent videos where he claims to both have been diagnosed with Crohn's disease and to have been cured from it, and to have cured himself miraculously with his diet. There are a few things that ring true and that are sad. Again, I sympathize with the guy. It's a sad story. But he says in that interview both that the doctors did not believe he had Crohn's disease. They concluded he did not have Crohn's disease. And also that they concluded that he was a liar or that he was untrustworthy. Now, that is very sad for a young person to deal with. And Durianrider has been open about the fact that he has mental health problems and he has a lot of animosity towards the medical establishment. So again, these things fit together, and I'm not here heaping scorn on him and saying he's the worst person in the world. You could already see there an etiology, a series of causes for why Durianrider acts the way he does around exactly these issues, including the over-the-top hysteria about steroids and steroidal medication, over-the-top claims about the medical establishment and how they can't really cure anything, etc., and over-the-top claims about how his vegan diet has changed his life. And, on one level, if you met someone like that who wasn't in a position of power or influence, you would just be happy for them. You just say, great man, I'm glad you quit drugs, I'm glad you quit alcohol, I'm glad you improved your diet, I'm glad you became, an athlete, I'm happy for you. And I've got a long list of brothers and sisters. If any one of them turned their lives around the way Durianrider did, I would be so happy for them. I would say, good for you. I'm so happy you quit drinking, quit all this other stuff. I'm so happy you're now vegan and enthusiastic about riding a bicycle and everything else. And I wish I was in a situation where I could just be happy for Durianrider. If he was a bit more of a mensch about these things, we could all just be happy for him. But he's not. He's constantly attacking other people, insulting other people, causing ridiculous levels of conflict, denouncing people who could be his allies and his friends. And, he makes pseudoscientific and false claims that are as damaging to veganism as, faith healers claiming that they can cure cancer or cure AIDS or anything else. Now, his partner in crime is Freelee, who again is one of the most influential people in veganism in the year 2016. As I say, I really hope every time I talk with these guys, I hope it's the last video I ever make. They have been very influential the last few years, but I do feel they've jumped the shark, partly because they have nothing new to say. I said to Henya and Jason at one point, this was not on camera, this was not in our recorded interview, but I said to them, that I felt Freelee and Durianrider should be desperate for their support to cooperate with them. That Freelee and Durianrider should be desperate to cooperate with people like Henya and Jason. And they were very surprised that I said this. They said, well, what are you talking about? And I said, well, you can't build a social movement on a guy sitting on the floor of his kitchen ranting incoherently about steroids. Again, we've heard it before. What these two have to say, they've said it again and again. They've said it on the news. They've said it in the newspapers. They've said it on their blog. They've said it in videos. And for them, repeating that same message again and again is in some ways the meaning of life. I guess I can sympathize. I can sympathize up to a point. But, apart from the fact that they're constantly alienating people who would be their supporters, something I've talked about a great deal on this channel, there's also just the reality of repetition. It doesn't have the same meaning the second time, the fifth time, the 10th time you've done it. And it doesn't have the same meaning when they're making mistakes. They're saying things that are factually wrong and scientifically untrue. And that's already been pointed out to them. They're not making the mistake for the first time. They're choosing to continue preaching something that I think they know to be false, or at least they know that other people have taken the time to really set out the facts and prove that it's false. Now, another theme addressed in this channel is the question of what credentials does Freelee have. If you search for Freelee credentials in this channel, you'll probably find that video. And I mentioned there that although Freelee vaguely mentions that she has an advanced certificate in nutrition, she always avoided saying what institution it was from. Then it had different reflections of this. Now, this links up to the broader themes I was just talking about. Let's play a quotation of Freelee's own voice, finally letting the cat out of the bag and telling us where indeed her credentials come from.
So I have conventional certification in nutrition, but I don't use that training at all anymore because it's so heavily funded by the meat and dairy industry that the information is just incorrect.
What certification do you have, Freelee?
So I have certification in nutrition, so advanced certification.
Where?
From the Australian Institute of Fitness.
Okay.
So
So there it is, the Australian Institute of Fitness. Now, if you do a 5-minute Google search, here's the importance of really checking your facts, checking your sources. If you do a 5-minute Google search, you might jump to the conclusion that she's lying, and I don't think she is. That's why I'm mentioning that up front here, because the Australian Institute of Fitness does not offer a certificate in advanced nutrition, such as they don't have a certificate of that name. Now, when I saw that, I thought, oh, they've probably changed their program since Freelee was a student there, and I think that's right. Now, the question I broadly asked in the past, well, a certificate can mean anything, and I compared this to my own experience, my own credentials, questions people ask me about what kind of education I've got, whether or not I'm an expert in this, that, or the other thing. It's something many, many people have to deal with who have unconventional credentials, confusing credentials, etc. So I do sympathize. And also, look, I'm going to put something else out there. The program, based on what I know about it, because I did some research into the current program offered at the Australian Institute of Fitness in diet and nutrition. If I could take that program here in Canada, you know what? I probably would. I might have taken it last year or something, depending on how busy I was. But I don't know how much it costs. That's actually one thing I didn't look into. I don't know how much money it costs. But sure. I mean, in a sense, even though I do not see this as equal to being a medical doctor or a research scientist, you're definitely not equal to a dietitian, a registered real dietitian. You probably can learn a lot in a program like this. And I'm not insulting Freelee or dismissing her credentials entirely. On the contrary, Freelee is. I think it's wrong. Freelee repeatedly says, a piece of paper means nothing. I think, on the contrary, you can learn a lot getting a certificate in diet, and you can learn a lot more in a formal university program studying the science of nutrition or dietetics. So I got the following message back from the Australian Institute of Fitness, because I wrote to them asking about this program. You were inquiring about the Nutrition Coach program. This program is a new program that opened last year, 2015. This is something we have never done before, as we have only focused on personal training, massage, and business. Let's pause there. The Australian Institute of Fitness is not a university. It's very obvious if you look at their website that 90% of what they do is training people to be fitness instructors, gym employees, and to some extent to be management of gyms. So if you just read this far, again, you might jump to the conclusion that Freelee is lying. I actually don't think she is lying. However, the institution does not fill one with confidence. But I continue. The nutrition program will run for 17 weeks. This is a blended program and will be delivered online and face-to-face. Once a month, you would need to head over to Canberra to do your one-day on-campus face-to-face tutorial. Pause. So, to be clear, it's a 17-week program. You spend almost all of the time at home with your computer, reading things on the internet, I assume using some web interface to send in some homework to prove that you're doing the reading, I hope. And once a month, one day a month, you do appear in person on campus. Could be an excellent program. Could be that people learn a lot. If it's a really well-run program, in 17 weeks, I would say you could learn as much as 1 year at a real university. Could be. I would generously say that you could learn as much as someone would learn in 1 year studying full-time on a university campus. However, you definitely cannot learn as much as someone in 4 years on a university campus. And in Canada, for example, being a registered dietitian takes more than 4 years. It can take as much as 5 years. If you're really well organized and you already have a BA in another subject, you can shave it down. But you are talking about 4-year programs followed by a practicum, followed by special programs after you complete a BA in the science of nutrition. So being a registered dietitian or getting just a bachelor's degree in nutrition is much, much, much more education than what Freelee did. But nevertheless, this nutrition coach program, as I said, if I had the option, if I had the opportunity, I would consider getting this myself in Canada, and I would not consider burning through 4 or 5 years of my life getting a full certification as a nutritionist or dietitian, a BA program. So probably a good thing for some people. So this is the part that confirms for me that I don't think Freelee is lying. The reply from Australian Institute of Fitness continues, both courses may share the similar content, but they are both a certification and has both branded differently. I feel this course is from a different provide, hence the different name. Close quote. So there are some grammatical errors in that paragraph from the Australian Institute of Fitness. They are not the Australian Institute of Spelling and Grammar. However, I think the point there is she's saying both courses. I asked specifically, the nutrition coach program, is that the same as the advanced certificate in nutrition? So without naming it, I think her point is that basically, yes, this is the same program, but it is branded differently. Obviously, it won't be completely identical, but this is probably representative of the type of certification Freelee has. Okay, guys, so let's wrap it all up with a bow. Below this video, you are going to find a link to a webpage that is called The Ugly Truth About Harley, Durianrider, John Stone. If you do a Google search, if you don't find the link, if you do a Google search for The Ugly Truth About Durianrider, I'm pretty sure you will find this page. And this comes back to the fundamental problem of pseudoscience, abuse of authority, the role of leadership of these people in veganism today. There are many embarrassing, stimulating, and interesting facts about Durianrider on this webpage, including his alleged history of making death threats against people, which people I know have told me about. People I know have told me that Durianrider has made death threats against them. His pattern of threatening to beat people up, his pattern of boasting and making kind of unrealistic and impossible claims about himself. But of all the things on this page, what I really want to draw your attention to instead is just a set of links to their own website, to the website that Durianrider and Freelee created, 30 Bananas a Day. There's a series of links to people trying to discuss the problem of weight gain on the diet. They were gaining weight, and they went onto these forums to discuss it. Now, as this guy, Anthony Colpo, explains, after he posted this set of links just showing, look, the diet doesn't work for everyone. And there is no diet that works for everyone. Again, it would be so much easier to sympathize with Freelee and Durianrider if they were just reasonable about these things. But they are unreasonable in the extreme. I've talked about this in the past. Like, if you say using caffeine will help you lose weight, it does for some people. It's not healthy, it's not advisable, it's not ideal, but there are some people who absolutely swear by the use of caffeine to lose weight, and it has been scientifically studied, etc. I'm not telling you to use caffeine. I'm anti-caffeine. I made a separate video on that, why I don't use any caffeine or why I avoid using caffeine. I try to use zero, as close to zero as possible. But nobody can easily say about any diet that it works for everyone, and there's a long list of reasons why that is, if you're inclined to be reasonable. But these links to people trying to discuss honestly and openly the fact that the diet didn't work for them, that they gained weight on 30 bananas a day, raw till 4, that they gained weight in the diet promoted by Freelee and Durianrider, those links today lead to a dead end because those discussions were deleted. Okay? In terms of the sciences, the most unpopular and dubious of the sciences are the social sciences. But they still are sciences. And even if you're just working with anecdotal evidence, even if you're just working with the fact that you meet people and chat with people casually and they tell you that the diet's working great, one of the worst things you can do is delete evidence to the contrary. When you do that, you destroy the credibility of all the anecdotal evidence you have, even if it is just anecdotal evidence. A lot of things that we have in our lives rely on anecdotal evidence. I'm going to give you one example from my own life really quickly. A lot of my life has to do with studying languages. When people ask me about the language program at my university and here in Canada now, my current university, I say it's a really bad language program. If they ask why, I'll give them some reasons why. Depends on how interesting they are. Depends on how interested they are, if they want to hear it or not. That's what I say. If I say that, it's anecdotal. A couple of weeks ago, I was getting on the bus, and a younger guy who knows me, he's in his last year of university here, but he's younger than I am. He started talking to me about the language program, and I said, I think it's a really bad program. I didn't say much about it at that moment. I said, well, He replied by saying he thought the program was really good. And I said, oh, well, that's interesting. But, let me tell you something. In my first year of studying Japanese and in my first year of studying Chinese, the only spoken exercise I did, the only exercise involving speaking the language, was the final oral exam, the exam during the last week of classes, approximately. And when I said that, he immediately laughed out loud. He laughed in a good-natured way, and he said, yeah, you're right. You know what? Those courses are absolutely terrible. And he said some things about why he thought the course was terrible. He said, and he reflected, he said what he was really thinking about were the courses on literature, which are more advanced courses and it's taught in a different way. There's not really the language courses. Those are studying the history of literature. So right there, you give an example of the kind of nuance you need, even in just collecting anecdotal evidence. I did research in Cambodia. We were talking about aspects of the healthcare system. Do they work or do they not work? Someone can tell you offhand, look, this healthcare program is terrible. It killed my son. You've got to sit down and in a sensitive way, without offending the person, without having them get angry at you or shut up, you now have to probe. For one thing, they could just be lying to you. It could be their son is still alive. He's not dead. But it's very likely, in this situation, this is a real example I dealt with. Somehow their son died from medical malpractice, from a medical accident. Now I've got to figure out enough about the circumstances without offending this person. The specific program that we're studying, was that at fault? Was it just the specific doctor at fault? Is there something I can learn from this about how this program really works? So again, anecdotal evidence matters. Is this a good university program or a bad university program? Is this a good medical system? I was dealing with specific aspects of the medical system. Not going to describe it here. Not the whole system in general. Cambodia, everyone knows. This system as a whole is pretty bad. But what can we do to improve the way the medical system works in Cambodia? And the question of, does a diet work? And will this diet work for you? Will it work for the type of person you are, on your schedule, with your needs, with your particular health conditions, etc.? Yeah, in real life, we often do rely on anecdotal evidence. There's a lot worth knowing in that article, The Ugly Truth About Durianrider. But to me, the most crucial thing I want you to feel the depth of, this is a guy who lied about having Crohn's disease, and who's lying now about being cured of his Crohn's disease. And this is a guy who responded to people honestly reporting that they were gaining weight, not losing weight, on 3,000 calories a day, etc. And he destroyed that evidence. He covered it up. And that doesn't wash off.